Deepti Kapoor is the author of 2 novels, Age of Vice and A Bad Character. Age of Vice is currently being translated into 20 languages and is in development for a TV series with FX Disney. Carmen Escobedo de Tapia is senior lecturer at the University of Oviedo. She is the author of several books and articles, such as Spiritual and Corporeal Selves in India, Approaches in a Global World. She has also translated into Spanish the poetry book The Day We Went Strawberry Picking in Scarborough by Indian author Ranu Uniyal. Carmen.
Thank you. Already? Yeah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone in the audience. Good afternoon, Deepti. Pleased to be here with you, to have you here with us, and have this opportunity to share this session commenting around your book, Age of Vice, which has been just published 2023, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts on the side of Guillermo Rodríguez, Casa de la India, all his equipment there, all this team, JLF team. I'm very pleased to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Casa de la India, who have managed to bring this little India in the heart of Spain. Against all odds, Guillermo's efforts have achieved a really acknowledgeable outcome. Also, it is this the first edition of JLF in the Spanish-speaking world, so it's an honor to be part of this celebration. Said this, the motto of the event is "Words are bridges," and indeed, words are a main part, a tool of literature. So, through literature, undoubtedly, we are connected, and this is what Deepti Kapoor has managed to do in her novel entitled Age of Vice. She has gathered all of us, the contemporary world, together, and we shall see as we discuss. Deepti Kapoor is one of the youngest voices in Indian narrative in English. She was born in India, grew up in northern India, and worked several years as a journalist in New Delhi. She now lives in Portugal with her husband. She has published up to the moment 2 novels, A Bad Character, 2014, and Age of Vice, just been published, and which has already caused a great literary impact on the world literary scene. Deepti Kapoor stands, in my view, as a global 21st century Indian woman writer. Age of Vice is a story of anger. A stern social criticism is present all through. It is a story that aims to steer our conscience and appeals to the senses likewise. Reading Age of Vice does not leave the reader indifferent, or it should not. I would place Age of Vice together with novels like The White Tiger, Aravind Adhika's White Tiger, Last Man in Tower, Mohsin Hamid's Exit West, The Last White Man, Amitav Ghosh's Gun Island. As you may have realized, these are all male authors, but there is a whole work by Indian women writers which started developing firmly back in the 1960s that have reached and have undergone an evolution up to the contemporary that would stand as voices the same as these authors I've mentioned, who actually criticize, who talk about claiming voices against the effects of capitalism and progress in countries like India, and I would say in the world as a whole. I don't know how you feel if I say that I would place you together with names like Arundhati Roy, Anuradha Roy, Kiran Desai, Anita Desai even. Who have been your inspirations? Do you consider yourself part of these contemporary writers, no, that conform Indian narrative in English nowadays?
Well, thank you, Carmen, for interviewing me and for that incredible introduction. And when I started to, write Age of Vice, which was, in a tiny room in Goa and then Delhi, and then I moved to Lisbon, I certainly didn't think that I'd be sitting in this incredibly beautiful hall in Valladolid in 2023 with, Usha Utthav, Shashi Tharoor, and Kabir Bedi in the. I mean, it's very surreal. And thanks for coming and being here. I don't know if I place myself in that line of Indian contemporary women writers. While I appreciate it, I draw my inspirations from a lot of different writers from across the world. I was deeply influenced by Marguerite Duras, and that she was the person who inspired me to think about writing a novel. Endo, Shishako Endo, Natsumi Saseki were Japanese novelists. So I wasn't thinking of, I'm thinking of just literature. I'm not thinking of men, or women. So it's always interesting that when you come from a certain tradition, then you get placed in that. And while I think I get asked this, do you talk about feminism in my novels? I think I just talk about, India and humanism, and it's what I'm interested in: corruption, in power, in structures of power, and how people get trapped in those systems.
Right. This is what I was trying to get to, no? I think we can focus on the novel, and well, I could say a lot of things about the novel. It would take us long, but unfortunately we have a span of time. And let me start with the title. Age of Vice, Kali Yuga. Do you really think that we are in the Kali Yuga? Because it can be a bit worrying if we take into account the predicted time of its length, no?
Well, I mean, the Indian astrological calendar certainly thinks we're in Kali Yuga. So, I mean, it just, when you're writing a novel and you're thinking of a title, and it just felt so apt. Kali Yuga, Age of Vice, the age of corruption, of decadence, of things going wrong, but also the fact that this is always the world. This is always how we live in this world where things will always be in a certain way. So yeah, I mean, this is basically what my novel is about.
Right, because I see under the title, I see here what I was saying, no? This connection actually among every people, all of us as human beings actually, no? Who have lost values of the humane with an E, right? We are lost actually in this technological advancement, in the midst of this eagerness, no? Of capitalism and advancement of progress. I don't know what progress, but it's there, right? Our reality. Your novel has been compared to a tornado, and it is a tornado, actually. It drives the reader through time, through emotions. The opening scene, I think, is the simplest you can find in the novel. You have 5 dead bodies on the pavement with a drunk driver in the car, unconscious. And from then on, you develop a world, actually, no? The world, actually, I should say. We are warned by the quotation of the Mahabharata that we are not only going to find a thriller here, but much more than that. And let me comment on your very personal style, which reminds me of Arundhati Roy in The God of Small Things. She's an architect, and she has admitted that her profession, her job, was projected on the way she built up the narrative. Is this the same with you? Do you think your profession, your journalistic perspective has influenced the way you have built up the narrative to a certain point?
Well, what my journalism profession, which happened a long time ago in my 20s, did was, give me the ability to go into a room and ask people weird questions and collect stories. So what I do is, the way I write, I don't actually think of a theme before I set out to write a novel and say, okay, these are the themes I'm going to focus on. It's going to be corruption and power. And I'm going to then create characters to dramatize these themes. The way I work is I think of stories or interesting people that I've known in my life, and it could be someone that I've met for just 5 minutes, but I'll take something from there, or interesting stories that I might have collected in my years as a journalist, and I build out from these people and their stories. I'll just throw them on the page and see what sticks. And the themes come later. So, I mean, it's a very organic and chaotic way of working, and slightly unpredictable, but it works for me. And then what happens is that the characters start to take a life of their own after a certain point of time. So that's the way I work. And what my journalism years, I think now really taught me was that I was a journalist in my 20s in Delhi, when Delhi was changing really rapidly. So this is when the reforms of the 90s were beginning to take root. This is about 2002 to 2007. So I watched Delhi turn from a kind of sleepy, sedate city into this sprawling, global, monstrous metropolis, right? And I was there I was basically driving for hours, about 5 or 6 hours every day, in my car, meeting people, documenting social trends. I had like a really open brief. It was a social trends correspondent. I didn't have to do much. I just had to go and figure out what's going on with people. And Sanjay doesn't remember this, but I even interviewed him. He has no idea, for a magazine. I think it was 2002 or 2003 at your place. It was a flat. I thought it was Vasant Kunj, but maybe I was wrong. I think it was about when you were still a theater director then. So I met so many different people, and this is very important. I had my day life as a journalist, my day job, but it was my night job or my night life that was also really important to my development as a novelist, because I spent a lot of nights partying with the newly emergent rich, these people, boys and girls that I had grown up with because I went to a boarding school. And in this new India, when fortunes were being made, and you had like the emergence of the super rich, I was basically an outsider insider in that world, and these stories that I collected from those nights as well went into the making of Age of Ice. So I always say that it took me 4 years to write it, but it was 20 years in the making.
Right. This leads me to ask you about the characters. I think you have a polyphony of voices in the novel. You have 3 main characters, apart from secondary ones that fly around, right? The main characters are Ajay, Suni, and Nida. Ajay, to me, all of them are symbolic. No? Ajay, to me, seems to be a representation of the poor, the down and out. On the other hand, Sunny is a representation of the new rich. He feels in an in-betweenness, no? Between the ethics and the fact that he has to go on preserving, no, all this empire that has been built up by his father. And then Nida is a representation of, I say, the modern Indian woman. She is a product of the liberalization of India, but she's also prey to the system, right? These are the 3 characters. They are very well developed there, but I want to ask you about a particular one, and it's a woman character. It's Farah, who appears at the end, right? To me, and this is a question I want you to clarify, with her, through her, you want to present a reverse situation of women, of the role of women in the country, no? She stands as a reversed, or in a reversed position, taking into account the role of women in the country and taking into account the context in which you place her, which is actually wedding day, no?
Well, because I suspect a large number of people haven't read the novel, so they won't know who Farah is. But as I just said, I work from stories and people I've known, and then the theme always comes later. So Farah is also based on someone I know. So and then they become symbolic later. So they're extremely specific in my head. And then later on, whoever wants to attach any kind of meaning is they do it. But that's how they're created first in my head, because I've seen that happen. So Farah is emblematic of a certain kind of modern young Indian woman who is very happy with her privilege, She's not questioning it. She's very happy with her life. She's very happy with the money that and the family that she's born into. In fact, she wants more of it. And she doesn't question it, unlike, say, someone like Neda and Sunny, who are, well, especially Neda, who comes from a sort of a family of intellectuals, but also the old elite. She's also very comfortable in her privilege, but she questions it. And she is our way into the world. And Farah doesn't. Farah's just a fun person. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find a way to make more money. And I've known people like that. I still know people like that.
Right. In this sense, also, I'd like to comment go back to commenting on your style, which reminds me of Raja Rao's, who is one of the so-called founding fathers of the Indian narrative in English, in The Serpent and the Robe, which was published at the beginning of the 20th century. I find here your style very similar to him in the sense that you break your narrative, you alternate constantly rhythms in your narrative. You start with sort of a romantic fluency of words, no? And suddenly you drive the reader through the nights of Delhi in these frantic rides in the middle of the night, no? And that you almost feel in the car, no? In those drives during the night. And at some point you stop and you describe, you have marvelous descriptions. I want to highlight your fantastic descriptive power, marvelous descriptions of the city, of the psychology of characters at some point, inner, outer, and you even have poetic bits that you include. You have more graphic parts in which you only use words, striking words that serve your purpose. And you even take languages, foreign languages. Very nice to find that you included these two characters, Maria and Teresa, speaking Spanish, and you include this language within your narrative. This reminds me so much of Raja Rao. I don't know if you have read him, if you knew.
I haven't.
You haven't.
But I will now. And thanks for that description. It's
Okay,
wonderful.
The Serpent and the Robe, right?
Okay, right.
All right. The Singhs and the Wadias are the families, the gangs that are protagonists in the story. They represent the reality of Delhi, but they remind us of The Godfather, the Italian mafia. You display a diversity of themes: love, hate, revenge, ambition, corruption, extreme violence at times, and you show at points the worst part of us human beings. And because of this, you have not only been compared to The Godfather, but also Shakespeare has been mentioned. How do you feel about that?
It's always strange to be compared to both. The Godfather comparisons have been coming quite thick and fast, and I always want to tell people, because then they read it thinking it's Indian Godfather, and then they're like, no, this isn't anything like The Godfather, and I'm like, no. So definitely there is a sort of business family and who are involved in criminality at the heart of the novel. But what I think I wanted to do, and what I eventually ended up doing, was I used the tropes and conventions of a thriller in order to craft something else. So when you think of a crime thriller genre, you always think of something that happens right at the start, which it's normally a killing or a series of killings, where a community's equilibrium has been destroyed, but there will be resolution in the end. All the tension will be resolved, and that's why reading crime fiction is actually an escapist pleasure, because you go into it knowing that you will be okay in the end. The reader will be okay. What I've done with Age of Vice is that I've thrown even more chaos into the world, especially in the end. So I think I wanted to do that because I was never intending to write a crime thriller. It was more about, I wanted to reflect, I wanted to do something more dangerous, but I also wanted to reflect the instability of the world that I find, that I live in. And that was very important to me. So it's basically the roller coaster goes off the rails. And I always tell people, well, it's also a trilogy, so there will be resolution at the end of book 3. So the comparison to The Godfather is very interesting, but it's, in my view, misleading.
Right. Yes, it is.
I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, yes, it is. No, the end especially, it's a chaos, actually.
Yeah.
It's a chaos, but then you find there, we won't say, but you find there hope, I'd say. Right. As we have been saying, main protagonists of your story are money, ambition, corruption. Settings are very important. The structure of the book brings the reader back and forth in time, places. You cover a particular moment from different perspectives. So it's a very, very complex. I'd say it's more than a thriller, the novel, no? In this sense. Maharagahan is present, London, Rajasthan, Goa, of course, New Delhi, which showed that you are a cosmopolitan. And New Delhi stands as a mega city. And here, I think this is very important because I see where you, at some point you mention, no? This concept of connection, only connect, which is actually what a writer experience is all about, no? Connection. New Delhi could also have been New York, or any of the mega cities that are in our contemporary world, where we are prey to corruption, we are prey to the ambitions of people, to the power of money. Have you experienced this yourself?
The power
of money. Not this feeling of being prey, no? to the negative effects of the city, which has been compared with Goddess Kali.
Certainly I have. I mean, I'm very guilty of being seduced by an extremely privileged, decadent world, and living in it, even if you're slightly as an outsider, and observing it and hoarding all the stories from it, and it's like almost like an inside-out perspective. I embedded myself in the world. I got tainted by it. I got a bit dirtied by it, and then I got out to write about it. So it's always different from, say, when a journalist goes out to, they go to do a story, maybe an expose or an investigative story, and then they go and they have a particular purpose in mind, and then they ask these questions, and they come out. With me, I spent years with a lot of very unsavory characters, and then I came out, and I like to indict myself or people like me as well in my fiction. I'm not saying that my shit doesn't stink. I'm saying that I'm writing about the compromises that everyone in India, or because I write about India, so has to make. Whether it's the rich and the privileged, the middle class, the upper middle class, we're constantly making compromises with our morality. In order to just live our comfortable lives, and the poor are being made to compromise with their dignity. So that's what I'm interested in writing about, like these personal compromises, morality.
Right, and here again, I'd like to establish a connection with Mulraj Anand. Ajay, to me, is very similar to his Coolie, published in 1935. We have this man, in your case, forced not to leave the mountains, to leave the rural environment and move to another place where he aims to pursue his dreams. No? At some point, he realizes that there's no place for the poor. There's no place for the poor in the world. Anand says in his narrative at some point that there are only two peoples in the world, two types of people in the world: the rich and the poor. How do you see this? I mean, should we go on this? I'm talking about the beginning of the 20th century. How do you see this? Do you agree with this, that we are pawns of destiny in a chessboard?
I mean, I look at the world now and I just see extreme inequality, and it's growing. So, then I look at India and I see, I mean, Ajay is really the oppressed everyman. There is that sense that, you know, he can try and do whatever he wants. He can try and, as much as possible, try and get himself out of his situation, become a big man. He certainly has the loyalty and the ambition to do that, but he can't escape his circumstances. So I'm also interested in asking these questions as a novelist. Why do people behave the way they behave? I'm not interested in the what as much as the why. Why are we like this? Why are these people like this? You know, why do we always make these choices? What sort of society facilitates these choices? What kind of power structures exist in a society like this? But I also just want to write a story that people will read, which is entertaining and propulsive. So I'm trying to do a lot of things.
Right. As you were saying this, no,
sorry, I just want to. Yeah, I don't want to be a didactic novelist. That's what. And I'm not providing solutions either.
Right. No, but you remind me of Anita Desai, who at some point in one of her novels, Fasting Feasting, published by the end of the 20th century, she says that most of the problems of our contemporary world are due to lack of communication, actually. No? Communication among human beings, not the East or the West, but human beings, no? That we lack, we fail.
I think it's a failure to understand each other, you know, and just to live in your own little bubble, of course.
Yeah. That's right. And this leads me to this question I have here, which I want to ask you. You live in Portugal, right? In the West. How do you experience the contrast between the West and the East, and how do you envision India from such a distance and from a different culture? I mean, you have Goa there, you've lived in Goa as well, but I'd like to know about this.
Well, I moved to Portugal for a very banal reason. I moved because my husband is British, and we wanted to escape Brexit and become, you know, European residents before it happened. But when I moved, and this was in 2018, I'd always lived in India, and I had started writing Age of Vice. I thought that, you know, Portugal and Lisbon would be a bit like Goa. I was just primarily thinking about the food, because Goan food is so amazing. And it was nothing of the sort. And the Portuguese basically introduced spices to the world, but have done nothing with it, with them in their own cuisine. So what I realized was that all the colonies of Portugal had been talking to each other, but not Portugal. So you get like the best chicken dish in Goa, which is actually an Angolan bushmeat recipe, cafriel, but you can't find it anywhere in Portugal. It was a complete shock to me. But when I moved, I was so full of India and so full of longing and loss, just for the sounds, the smells, that I could transmit all of that to my writing. And I think it really helped in a way to move, because I was, I missed it intensely. I could write about that. I could write those, especially the sensory experiences, but I could also be more radical in my exploration of character. And I don't know if I would have done that if I was writing the novel sitting in Delhi or in Goa, because I would have maybe, I don't know, been, it's almost like I poured everything out. because I was living far away, and I just thought, okay, just do it. And I have no idea how the novel would have come out if I had written it in India.
No, definitely, as I said, your descriptive power is magnificent, and both the city and Goa, you can, when you describe their, when they are, you can feel, no, the sand, the sea, you can feel, it appeals to the sensory world so deep and so realistically. Settings is important, as I said, and linked to this, to what you're saying, no? There is also a contrast between the mountain, the rural, the city, the mountains. This is a constant in Indian narrative in English from its very first stage. My question is, do you think this is something that is inherent to you as an Indian? Nature is also important, and it's there. Issues like identity, family, and mixing things, right? Because we might be running out of time. But, do you think that there are things that are essential to you as Indian, that you see yourself from far away with a different perspective? Well,
a lot of people have said that your descriptions of food are great in the novel, and I guess that's because food is really important. Indian food is super important to me. So, it's strange because when you're writing, you don't think about these things. A lot of the places that are in the novel are places I have lived in, I've traveled to, and worked in, and I know them. I write what I know, so I wrote about it. I'm not the kind of person who will write about somewhere that, a completely different place or character. That's just not how I work. So the Goa scenes are because I lived in Goa, and I took that road with my husband actually many times on a motorcycle to this deserted beach, and I thought, well, this is a great scene to include, because it meant something to me. And while I was writing it, I could be there, and that was fun too. So, and writing for the most part is just, it's technical, it's problem solving, it's really hard, and then sometimes you can write a nice scene which was, at a great place in your past that you can remember, a memory, and then it means something to you, but then you can transmit and it means something to someone else as well.
No, this is precisely what it is, no? The fact that I think any Western reader can feel identified with many of the things there, no? In fact, you've been compared to, compared to Shakespeare, to The Godfather, so you have the whole world in 446 pages here.
Well, actually 550.
540. 546.
So just in case,
I was like,
it's
almost 600 pages.
It started off at about 780 pages. I cut it down.
All right. Certainly, the novel has all the ingredients to have been considered to be released as a TV series. You've got detailed descriptions of settings, of characters, of scenes, and, well, many, producers, they have tried to fight, they have fought for you, actually, no? They have fought for you.
But that's because I actually did write it with a view to making it, to adapting it into a TV show or a film, because, as a professional novelist, if you want to make a living these days, you've got to find a way to have, either you have, a rich family, which I don't, or and then you can keep writing little novels. But for me, it was just, if this is, people don't read books these days, but they do discuss TV shows.
Yes, they do.
So, as we have seen with Succession. So, recently. So, it was always written with that view.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also think visually, and I think that helps. I think sometimes in scenes, the positioning of all the various actors in the scene, and then I basically translate that into words. Okay. And I think that really helped with the way it was received by producers in LA, because there was this clamor for it, because you can see it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And in turn, do Indian TV series that are now on represent the reality of India as it is, actually, as you perceive it?
Sorry, what's the question?
The TV series that are now on, do they show the reality of India?
Well, I don't know. there's many, so I can't say. I mean, there's so much TV right now. What I do find is that there's the TV, there's the idea of what, say, Hollywood wants from India, which is very different from how Indians perceive themselves. And that has happened because I've been trying to adapt Age of Vice into a script, to a TV show for the last 2.5 years, and working with executives mostly and producers in LA, and they have a very specific idea of character and of Indians. And it's been extremely frustrating, to be honest. And it's also because I think we speak English. So they think that they know us, and I'm trying to tell them that no, Indians are different. We don't articulate ourselves the way Americans say, I want this. And it's constantly rubbing up against this idea of India and fighting it. So what I'm now trying to do is bring in more Indians in the actual process of writing it, and move and step away and just keep writing the books, because then I'm just I can do my books. I'm a tyrant myself. But trying to do a TV show has, for a global audience, is very different from making a TV show just for Indians.
Right, so you wrote the book with a Western audience in mind?
No, I wrote the book just for myself.
All right.
Because you can't think of anyone.
All right,
yeah.
All right. Because I consider this global, right, actually.
Yeah. But what the Western audience has absolutely fallen in love with is the first character, Ajay, and they just want more of Ajay. Whereas I was writing it with a whole cast of characters and definite ideas of what I wanted to do. So that's been really surprising, because also I think it's an American thing. You want the hero's journey. You want the underdog to triumph in the end. So that's been really interesting as well, because I'm trying to I take the story away from the most cherished and identifiable characters, and then I leave you with the worst. And that was a decision because, our own physical reality is constructed by people who aren't exactly nice. It's like there are people like Sunny who have the power to alter our worlds, and they're not nice people. So that's what I didn't want, that hero triumph of the hero, that hero's journey that basically the Americans wanted to read. But then it is a trilogy, so you don't know what's going to happen. Right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any plans for future stories? Anything?
Well, this is
anything in your mind, or
I've
just
been
enjoying?
Oh God, no. Yeah. I've basically signed myself into writing 3 of these, so that's my future plans. My future gone for many years. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Soaking in the Age of Vice.
All right. We should enjoy Age of Vice, to read Age of Vice, because as I said, it won't leave the reader indifferent, or it should not. We're all there. I don't know if there are questions among the audience. Yes, please.
Hola, bienvenida a la Feria del Libro. Una pregunta. Las castas, que sabemos que existen ahí, los intocables, etcétera, etcétera, ¿son un impedimento importante también actualmente para el ascenso social?
You don't have, okay, you said. No, she's asking whether the caste are a problem, you said? A problem?
En español.
Sí, que un problema.
Si sigue siendo un problema, aparte del intelecto.
Oh, sorry.
You can use that, yeah, but
Una capacidad intelectual privilegiada, perteneces a una casta social y eso es un freno actualmente para el ascenso o el ascensor social.
Okay. Can she repeat it?
Sí. Pregunto, las castas sociales en la India, todos sabemos que existen actualmente Y mi pregunta es, si a pesar del poder intelectual o la capacidad económica por pertenecer a esa casta social, es un impedimento para el ascensor social, para pertenecer, para subir de nivel.
Yeah, I mean, not just caste, but class as well. I mean, yeah, caste is ever present, but there are many impediments to break through that social ladder. Having said that, you know, there's a lot more social mobility now, and this is of the last 30 years of reforms and the modernization of the Indian economy, but you know, India is a deeply divided hierarchical society, and if I start going into all the different problems, it'll be another hour. So, but yeah, it's definitely an impediment, and that's what you see in a character like Ajay. However hard he tries, he can't get over his background.
Yeah.
I'm from Portugal, so I commiserate with Deepti about the lack of spices in Portuguese food. Working theory is that the Inquisition didn't like the aphrodisiacal effects of spices, and that's why we don't have them anymore. I wanted to ask you about the style of the novel. It's very distinctive, very direct, bare bones, brutal, no adverbs. El estilo es muy distintivo, muy directo, muy brutal. I was wondering where you got it from, if it's because you were writing for television a little bit already, or any influences. And I think it's going to be very influential. I can't imagine young writers wanting to write like you.
Well, thank you for that. I hate adverbs, so there. And so I don't use them that much. I think they should be used frugally. And I think the style is, you know, it's instinct, a lot of, you know, just the way I write, but also the kind of books I've read and been influenced by, which is Bolaño, 2666 is a big influence on my, you know, writing. Svetlana Alexievich, Secondhand Time. So, you know, the books, you know, a mid-20th century American fiction. So I am influenced by that bare-boned kind of not so heavy on, not dense language. And it's like, I want it to be easy, you know, it's like I want to seduce the reader in, and then they'll just kind of come into the world. And if you try and do that with something that's full of very big words or adverbs, or, you know, then it's sometimes hard to get into it, you know. So I'm glad you feel that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? Spanish, English, no questions? No?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so eager. I have not read your book, but I'm so eager to read it now that we've heard all this, especially coming from India. And a lot of things that you've spoken about, I can literally imagine visually. But when you were going through the process of writing this, or, you know, sort of picking up notes, as you said, did you have like a constant battle within yourself as an Indian? Because there are times when you see a lot of things which you don't like, but because you're part of a society that you've grown up with, did that hinder to a certain extent in your writing?
Like, did society, like the idea of being part of an Indian framework?
Milieu, yeah.
No, I think as a novelist, you just, it's all about, being a novelist is about betrayal, you know? You betray people close to you, you betray, you know, the society you come from, you indict everyone and yourself. So that's a question that I grappled with years ago and said, I'm not going to, no. So, and you know, my immediate family is extremely happy and proud of my writing, so that's good. So I didn't have any problems there.
Good for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, there, the back.
Thank Thank you. I haven't read the book, so I'm not too sure on the book, but just on the food, I wanted to mention about the food as well. If you're really looking for food here, it's not the same as well. I've been living in Spain for a year now. I lived in London as well before. Just on the question on the society, to you really, you mentioned the caste system. Is that something?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
High.
Like this?
Yeah.
If you have the caste system you mentioned, do you still see that sort of for the future as well, the hierarchical system? So I'm talking about the caste system.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll hold it this way probably better.
Yeah.
So the question regarding the caste system you addressed earlier, I'm not too sure if it's in the novel as well or not, but I see that changed over the year. Do you foresee that, or do you have something in your book which you're looking to address?
I still can't, sorry, your
Can you
words
speak up a
are
little bit?
being lost in the,
Yeah,
when you
can
ask the question, the words are lost. I don't understand, so.
Not too sure. Can you hear me now better, or?
You have
Yeah.
to speak up a little bit.
Okay. Probably this way is better. So the caste system, the question is for the caste system you mentioned. I see that's changed, but my question here to you, to address the caste system and the hierarchical society things in India, are you planning something on the novel as well? Or if there is any, good. That's the question really.
Am I planning something in my novel?
Yeah. Yes, around the caste system.
Well, I mean, one of the characters is a Dalit, so, you know, and we're going to keep seeing his progression. So, because you haven't read the novel, I can't comment on it. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, definitely yes, I guess. It's, yeah.
Very much built into the book.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
You have to read the book, yeah.
because of his background, which
Yeah.
is mostly the fact that it is caste.
Yeah.
That is one of the reasons why it's the glass ceiling.
Thank
But
you.
read the book.
Thank you.
Another question here, Kabir Bedi. Here?
Hi, Deepti. I haven't read the book yet, but I'm very keen to. I just wondered, do you start off with a bunch of characters and then create a plot? Or do you start off with a plot and then create the characters?
Well, I always have the beginning. So in this case, I knew that I was starting with a car crash, and that sets off the incidents of the novel. But I have characters, and then there is a semi-plot, but that kind of develops along the way. So more character before plot.
But my question is, if you have a large story, and now you're thinking, a trilogy, how can you plant incidents or clues or anything that make a plot more surprising in the end, unless you have a plot?
Yeah, so yes, there is a general direction. Like, I know where my novel is going to end and how it's going to end. I have the scenes in my head. But how we're going to get there, I'm still actually plotting at the moment. So you're right. Now I already have my characters, but I've realized that it is important. Plot's important as well. Towards the end of, almost the end of working on Age of Ice, it was difficult because I don't plot on a page, and I was holding everything in my head, and it was really hard because I thought, like, sometimes that your head's going to burst. So so much was going on, and that does happen when you're writing a larger novel. So I think the wise decision is always to have a storyline and a plot, which I'm now trying to adopt. But it's also like I like working organically and slightly chaotically.
Good. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
The novel doesn't have a linear plot, and she's explaining the way she works, and it shows, right? It's a very, very personal style you're going to find here. And someone said there it's going to be influential, I'd say, in the development of Indian narrative in English. I think, well, I have myself several literary landmarks in this evolution, no? And in particular, Anita Desai, for me, is a literary landmark. And as I was reading your novel, I had to read it in a week, right? I read and read, and you can't stop reading, I bet you. So the moment you start, make sure that you have time to devote your time to the reading. I said, this is going to be a literary landmark.
Thank you.
So,
that's very kind.
Yeah, I have to congratulate you because, as I said, the structure is complex. No, I did a whole planning of the structure to understand everything and to put everything together. No, and everything goes together in 5 different parts, in 600 pages, and everything seems to have been planned, even though you have not planned it, no? The chaotic end is chaotic because you want to show it chaotic, right? But then chaos is solved as well, no? So thank you. I'd say that you have to read this novel, Deepti Kapoor, Age of Vice. Both Western and Indian readers are going to find yourselves here reflected, because it is our contemporary world. It is India, but it can be any place in the world. As she has said, no, she's a compromise writer with what is happening nowadays in this age of vice, and she aims, I'd say, to as the other women writers I mentioned, no, she aims to make us realize about what is happening, no? What is happening not only in India but everywhere in the world. We are human beings. We are the same everywhere. The pandemic has shown us how vulnerable we are, and so we have to consider that we are our planetary condition as a species in this contemporary world. And this is shown in Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. So congratulations on my side, Deepti, and a pleasure to have had the chance to talk to you and exchange views with you.
Thank you, Carmen. This has been
Very
wonderful.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
So, thank you to Deepti Kapoor and Carmen Escobedo for this very interesting presentation and discussion. I'd like to add that Deepti Kapoor's book, that most of us have not read yet, is available in the hall, and Deepti will be very kindly signing copies in the hall just outside here. I'm going to say this lo voy a decir en español también, que el libro de Deepti, Age of Vice, está a la venta en la entrada, y Deepti va a firmar copias aquí, si les queréis. So, we'd like to thank Valladolid City Council and Valladolid Book Fair and our wonderful hosts, the Círculo de Recreo. We're delighted to present a token of our gratitude to our guests. And just to remind you that if you would like to have a copy of Deepti's book, it's on sale in the hall just outside. Si quieren adquirir una copia del libro de Deepti, está disponible en la entrada. The next session, also just to remind you, will be at 5:30 this afternoon after lunch. Sacred Games, A Tale of the Indian Mafia, with Vikram Chandra in conversation with Susana Torres. And also, for anyone that may not return after lunch, I hope you all will, we'd like to invite you to the music performance by Kutle Khan Project at the Plaza Portugalete at 9 p.m. this evening. But I'm sure you'll all be here again after lunch. Thank you.